You're about to hear the full, true story of Kathy Hobbs, a quiet teenager from Las Vegas who vanished one night in 1987, only to be found murdered days later. Her case haunted investigators for decades, became one of the most discussed cold cases from the 1980s, and was eventually linked to a known serial killer. But the circumstances around who did it and why are as chilling as the crime itself. This is the story of Kathy Hobbs, the girl who predicted her own death and whose murder still raises questions years later. Kathy Hobbs was born and raised in Las Vegas, Nevada. She was a teenager with a vivid imagination and a deep sensitivity about life and death. Long before she ever went missing, Kathy expressed a fear that she wouldn't live past the age of 16. Friends and family later recalled that she mentioned this repeatedly, sometimes casually, sometimes with deep anxiety. This wasn't a joke or teenage exaggeration. By the time she reached her mid-teens, this fear had become part of her personality. She struggled with stress and worry, and some who knew her said it affected how she lived day to day. On her 16th birthday, she's reportedly relieved. She believed she had passed the age she had always feared. She turned 16 in April 1987, breathed a sigh of relief, and started to make plans for the future. She enrolled as a beauty student and began living a more normal teen life. But what happened next turned every hope her family had on its head. The date was July 23, 1987. Kathy told her mother she was going to walk to the corner store near their home, a short trip, one she had made many times before. She let her mom know what she was doing, and her mother went to bed, assuming Kathy would be back soon. Around 11:17 p.m. that night, store records confirmed that Kathy purchased a book. The clerk later said she seemed normal and calm. She wore a white jacket and pink pants, important details that would matter later. After that purchase, she was never seen alive again. Her mother didn't notice anything unusual until the next morning when Kathy didn't return home. By then, it was clear something was wrong. When Kathy didn't come home, her mother called the police and reported her missing. This was unusual. This frightened a family who had already lived through years of worry over her strange premonitions. Officers began canvassing the area, but there were no signs, no sightings, and no leads at first. Then, 9 days after she disappeared, a geologist named Rick Picault was hiking in a remote area of the desert near Lake Mead, about an hour's drive from her home. He noticed a strange odor and followed it, discovering a body lying in the dirt. It was Kathy Hobbs. She was found several miles from her home, alone in the desert, her body showing clear signs of brutality. When investigators arrived, they documented tire tracks at the scene. A vehicle had pulled in, turned around, and left. Nearby, 2 large rocks were spattered with blood. These rocks would later prove significant in understanding her final moments. The coroner's report was grim. The cause of death was repeated blows to the head, blunt force trauma inflicted with considerable strength. Kathy had been sexually assaulted before her death. Her clothes were torn, and her body was left in the harsh desert heat. Blood evidence found on the rocks was matched to her. Investigators immediately knew this was no accident. This was a murder. Someone had picked her up, taken her to that remote place, assaulted her, and killed her before leaving her body behind. But who? At the scene, there were no witnesses. There were no obvious fingerprints. What they did have were tire tracks, the rocks stained with blood, and a tragic young life cut short. Weeks after Kathy's body was found, something strange happened. On October 24, 1987, the Las Vegas Police Department received an anonymous message on their answering machine. The voice was male, calm, detailed. The caller said he had seen someone grab Kathy outside the store, where she bought her book, and push her into a car. He described her clothing correctly: white jacket, pink pants, and even said one of the men involved was named Robbie. He told police where she was taken and how it happened. But there was a problem. He didn't leave a name or phone number. When investigators checked the license plate number he provided, it turned out to be fake. Police publicly appealed for the caller to come forward. They never heard from him again. The anonymous tip remains one of the most mysterious pieces of this case, because it matched details only someone present at the time could know. For years, the case seemed unsolvable. Detectives interviewed hundreds of people, examined every lead, re-examined evidence, but nothing concrete came up. Then attention turned to Michael Lee Lockhart, a convicted serial killer from Walbridge, Ohio. Lockhart had been arrested for multiple murders in Texas, Indiana, and Florida. He was known to have been traveling through Las Vegas in 1987, at the exact time Kathy disappeared. Here's what made him a person of interest. He stole a blue 1986 Toyota Celica that was documented in Las Vegas that year. Fibers from that vehicle were later matched to trace evidence found near Kathy's body. Investigators also found receipts and records placing him in the area at the right time. When questioned, Lockhart spoke in ways that investigators later described as a virtual confession. He didn't confess in court, but his statements hinted strongly that he was involved in her murder. Lockhart was convicted of other murders and later executed in Texas in 1997 for those crimes. Because he was already on death row, authorities did not pursue a separate trial for Kathy's murder, but most investigators now believe he was responsible. This means the case is technically closed, even if no formal conviction was entered specifically for Kathy's death. Why would someone like Lockhart kill Kathy? Serial killers driven by sexual violence and opportunity often follow patterns. Opportunity. Kathy was alone at night. Vulnerability. She was walking by herself in a familiar but quiet neighborhood. Predator behavior. Lockhart's known crimes all involve attacking young women. From a criminal profile perspective, this attack fits Lockhart's known modus operandi, preying on young women, using vehicles to abduct them, and carrying out violence in isolated areas. There's no evidence that Kathy knew Lockhart or that this was planned. It appears to have been a crime of opportunity, carried out by a violent predator in the area. Kathy's death devastated her family. Her mother and father, her siblings, and even neighbors struggled with grief, guilt, and unanswered questions. After her death, the family found letters Kathy had written before her 16th birthday. Letters addressed to family members, telling them how much she loved them and asking them not to grieve too deeply if something happened to her. These letters have become a haunting part of her story because they showed how deeply she feared her own mortality, even before anyone could have predicted what would happen. For decades, the case remained in public memory, largely because of the mystery around it. It was featured on documentaries and true crime shows. People debated the anonymous caller. Fans of unsolved mysteries argued whether the license plate clue was real or a hoax. Some even questioned whether Lockhart really did it. But police departments and forensic teams continued to treat it seriously. Eventually, with the link to Lockhart and the closing of the investigation, authorities consider the case closed, meaning they have identified the most likely perpetrator, even though no separate trial or conviction occurred for this specific murder. That doesn't erase the pain, but it does bring a measure of resolution. Today, the story of Kathy Hobbs remains one of the most talked about teen murder cases from the 1980s. It raises hard questions. How many predators traveled through cities like Las Vegas without ever being stopped? How critical are timely witness reports in solving crimes? And how does a single anonymous tip change the course of an investigation, for better or worse? Most importantly, it reminds us that behind every case file, every statistic, and every cold case board, there was a real person, someone with hopes, fears, dreams, and a life that should have continued. Kathy Hobbs never got the chance to grow up. She never got to see adulthood. But the efforts to understand what happened to her and why it happened have made her story known, a sober reminder of the fragility of life and the drive of investigators who refuse to forget. If you found this story meaningful and want to learn more about real cases like this, solved and unsolved, subscribe to Truth Trove Stories. We dig into these mysteries with respect, depth, and a commitment to truth. Thanks for listening. Stay safe, and we'll see you in the next story.